Hello, this is cjhoyle. Today is Saturday, November 21st, 2020, and I'm standing here at the intersection of Bloor Street and Bathurst Street in Toronto. For some context, this corner of the intersection over here is where the Honest Ed's building used to be, which has now been converted into a residential tower which is currently under construction. Today I've got my Linear Limo Recumbent Bike with me, which has an action camera mounted on the front of it. And in this video I'm going to be riding east along Bloor Street from here all the way to Danforth Avenue, which now has bike lanes on it that are continuous all the way there. Alright, so as this traffic light turns green, I'll begin my way heading east along Bloor Street West. This portion of Bloor Street has had bike lanes since 2016, but they were reconfigured in the summer and fall of 2019, and they were, I guess, upgraded to raised bike lanes that are, at the same level or similar level as the curbs. At least for this eastbound side. The westbound side is still just a narrow painted bike lane, at least for this stretch from between Bathurst and Spadina. But while all that construction was going on, while they were doing that work, this entire roadway was torn up, and the reason was not just because of the bike lanes. They were sorry, I lost my audio there for a second. As I was saying, the reason that they had to tear the road up here while they were doing that work was because the thing that actually triggered them to do the work here is because they had to replace the water mains underneath the Bloor Street, which is something that they do every 100 years or so. So they had to, and the entire road was torn up, and it lasted for like 6 months or so. So it's kind of inconvenient because this section of bike lanes is, right in the middle of Bloor, where lots of people are riding. And then there's this middle section where you go from riding on a nice protected Bloor Street bike lane to all of a sudden you're riding in a construction zone with, just no separation for cyclists and, very rough and bumpy conditions. All right, so I'm just about to cross Spadina Avenue or Spadina Road, depending if you turn right or left here. This is where the road changes names. And beyond here, we're back to the original design of Bloor bike lanes that were put in 2016. Although I should mention this section of Bloor needs its water mains replaced as well, and I believe they originally had planned on doing that work during 2020, but that job got deferred. So what I described on that last section of Bloor will probably be true here next summer or the summer after. So it's a relatively warm Saturday. It's about 5 or 6 degrees Celsius. The sun's not really shining, but it's not really too windy either. We're just crossing the St. George Street intersection there, and we're hoping as part of this project where they reconfigure or they redevelop the roadway here, that they're going to install a protected intersection there at St. George. Unfortunately, a couple of years ago, there was a woman riding her bike at that intersection who unfortunately got killed. Her name was Dahlia Chaco. So we're just about to pass Bedford Road, and it's somewhat common knowledge that the mayor of Toronto lives in a condo tower that's pretty close to that intersection back there. Over on the right, we're going past the Royal Conservatory of Music. And just beyond there, this very unusual, modern-looking building, also on the right, is the Royal Ontario Museum, or the ROM, R-O-M. So the next intersection that I'll be going past is the intersection of Bloor and Avenue Road, or Bloor and Queen's Park, depending on which way you turn. And the last video that I posted was me riding my bicycle up University Avenue, which eventually becomes this road. So this corner right here is actually where I ended that last video. And beyond here, this is where Bloor did not used to have bike lanes up until this past summer. There was this middle section of Bloor that just had these kind of sharing arrows, the things that I'm riding over right here, there was no separation for bikes. There were just basically 2 lanes of vehicle traffic in both directions. But as part of the pandemic relief, they decided to step forward and give cyclists a safe way to get across the middle of the city, and they've modified this street into bike lanes, although they are labeled as temporary bike lanes. But they certainly seem to get a lot of use. You can see right ahead of me, there's within view I can see 5 people right now riding bikes on this, and this is just a regular cold Saturday in November. There's a myth that cycling is only possible about 4 months a year. Well, is November one of those 4 months that people are including when they say that? Because, like I said, I'm seeing lots of people cycling out here. This area is known as Yorkville, and this particular area of retail here is known as the Mink Mile. The Mink Mile. And it's known that because of that, because it's full of lots of very high-end, expensive boutiques and whatnot. And the real estate value to if you wanted to rent a storefront and open a store here, the amount that you need to pay would be higher on a per square footage basis than anywhere else in Canada. Oh, and there's someone blocking the bike lane, unfortunately, which does tend to happen here. Unfortunately, they have these little parking areas over on the right, but they cross the bike lane for the cars to get in and out, and they tend to do that sometimes. So although it's nice to have bike lanes here, they are not without their flaws. Alright, so I'm just about to cross Yonge Street now, although I have a yellow light before I'll get to do that. Yonge Street is sort of the center divider in the city of Toronto. So Bloor Street East here, as Bloor Street West that I was riding on, is now turned into Bloor Street East, and I'm just going to walk my bike across here because this intersection has in it what's called a scramble, which means that the intersection transfers from being a north-south intersection, then they change the lights and it becomes east-west, but they have a third cycle, which is where pedestrians are allowed to just use the intersection and cross in all directions. So it doesn't apply for bikes, so that's why I got off my bike so I could walk across. So these temporary bike lanes continue here, and one thing I do like about these bike lanes is how wide they are. They basically just take in a entire vehicle lane and transformed it into a bike lane, although you can see here it's being used illegally by Metro Online Grocery for parking right now, which is rather unfortunate, but thankfully there was nobody in the vehicle lane and I could safely get around, but that's not always the case. So now we're just about at Church Street now. Church Street runs sort of north-south parallel to Yonge Street. It's the next road over to the east of it. And if you were to turn left here, Church Street curves and it eventually lines up and becomes Davenport Road, which becomes an east-west street. So just waiting for our signal here to cross. You can see there's some Christmas decorations at some of these office buildings already. And yeah, so this section here, again, it didn't have bike lanes until this summer. They were put in as part of the Active TO program. If you're someone that likes bike lanes and they think they're essential and they like seeing these Active TO bike lanes in, there is a petition that I'll link below that you can sign to support these being made permanent. Doesn't matter where you're from. If you don't live in Toronto, but you think it's important that Toronto has bike lanes, you're certainly still able to sign that. The next intersection here is, if we were to turn right, well, actually underneath of where there's sort of a bridge here, and that's for Mount Pleasant Road, which I made a video about earlier this year, where I rode Mount Pleasant, the full distance of it, all the way from way up north of Lawrence Avenue all the way down to just south of Bloor, where it ends right there. So this next intersection coming up is Sherbourne Street. Sherborne has a protected bike lane on it that goes north-south. It's been here for a long time and is quite well used. And beyond here, this is the portion of Bloor that already had bike lanes on it. These bike lanes go back earlier than the 2016 ones, I believe. And I should mention, I did film a video of Bloor Street East approximately a year ago. And that, of course, was before those bike lanes. So if you want to go and see what that looked like, to be able to compare and contrast, I'll put a link to that down in the description. And the part of Bloor that's east of Sherbourne is actually kind of the newest portion of Bloor in terms of it being a roadway. Bloor used to terminate at Sherbourne. It used to be a dead end, and that's because there's a valley over to my left called the Rosedale Valley. And the valley kind of diagonally crossed where the line of Bloor would have been. But in the early 1900s, the city decided to build a bridge that would extend Bloor and go across the Rosedale Valley, which I'm about to cross right here. And eventually it would cross the Don Valley, which is a much bigger valley. And it would connect up with Danforth Avenue, which is where I'm heading today, where I'm gonna end this video. So on the side you can see those concrete walls or concrete rails. That's because right now we're riding over top of a valley. There's a bridge there. And of course I should mention also I've made a video riding my bike down Rosedale Valley Road, which follows the bottom of that valley, so you can also see that bridge, the view of it from below. This here is called Castle Frank Road, and over on the other side of the road, over on the left, there's a subway station called Castle Frank Station. Something that I haven't mentioned is that Bloor Street also has a subway line, the Bloor Danforth line, line 2, which runs underneath of Bloor Street. And of course it becomes, Danforth Avenue eventually, but it's the Bloor Danforth line. And we've been, riding along on top of that subway all the way along today since Bathurst Street. I haven't been calling out all the all the subway stations, but we have been riding over top of lots of them. So here we now, after crossing the Rosedale Valley and riding over some more road there, we're now about to cross the Don Valley, which, as I said, is a much bigger valley, so a much bigger bridge is needed. So this is known as the Prince Edward Viaduct. And in my video where I rode this stretch, as I said about a year ago, I gave a little bit more details about the history about the construction of this project, but it's a pretty big one. As I said, it's quite a big valley, and having this bridge here really did do a good job in connecting the east end and the west end of Toronto together. Before that, Danforth Avenue was already sort of had its own little downtown area, but it was pretty isolated from the rest of Toronto, because to get over here you'd either have to go south and cross some bridges that were further down the valley where the valley is smaller, or you'd have to actually go all the way down to the bottom of the valley, cross a little bridge over the river, and then come up a very steep hill on the other side. So we're just about to cross the bridge now. And I should mention, these bike lanes that have been here on the bridge have been here for quite a while, which is pretty essential considering, the valley provides such a barrier between the two sides of the city, so it's really important to make it safe for cyclists to be able to have somewhere to get across safely. This intersection right ahead is called Broadview Avenue, and beyond there, that's where the road changes names and becomes Danforth Avenue. And as you can see, Danforth Avenue is one of the other lucky streets in Toronto that received bike lanes this year. And of course, that's something that I'll be showing in a future video. Well, anyway, I hope you enjoyed joining me on this narrated tour of this segment of Bloor Street. If you watched all the way to the end of this video, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comment section below, and thanks for watching.